We are here today to remember not the death, but the life of a man. A man that was known as a hard worker. A man that loved hunting and fishing. A man that was one of the best stock car racers New Jersey saw in their early days. A man who was responsible for single-handedly ending the Korean War. Charles Rhinebeck was born in Rocky Hill, New Jersey. He used to joke that he was related to President Buchanan, one of the worst presidents in history. He was proud of his heritage, both Indian, German, and English. In May of 1953, Charles graduated basic training from the Army. Only 2 months later, the Korean War ended as they were getting ready to ship him over there. He always used to joke with the family that the Koreans knew he was coming and that was the whole reason they ended the war. He was a man that worked majority of his life as an automotive mechanic. He was a hard worker and had a great job for New Jersey Parks and Recreation Department. He ended up retiring working for the department and loved the opportunities he had while he was there. Before he left, I remember when I was a young kid, he took me to the park one day and they had a small enclosure with animals, different kinds of animals. And he was in charge of overseeing them. And one of his favorite things to do was bring people over to the bear. There was this big bear in this cage, and everybody obviously was scared of it. And he would just unlock the cage and walk right in there with it and give it a big hug. And this bear would just lick him. And it was one of the funniest things to watch. Obviously, as a kid, I was petrified that my pop-pop was going into the cage with the bear. But it was something he loved. It was a job he enjoyed, and I always admired that. Pop-Pop had many hobbies that he enjoyed, the top ones being hunting and fishing. As soon as you walked into his house, you knew he liked hunting because there was deer heads hanging everywhere, staring back at you. Another great hobby that was probably considered more to a hobby to him was stock car racing. In the early days of stock car racing, before it was popular and everything was dirt track, he was quite a name in stock car racing in New Jersey. He won some championships, he won many races, and I'll never forget the day he came to see me, and he had just gotten back from the library and was going through the old microfiches, and he had come across a bunch of old news articles about him. It had some of his championships and pictures of him in front of his car, and it was just great seeing his face light up. He would take me to the dirt track races in New Jersey, and we'd talk about his days racing. And I remember the funniest thing he always used to tell me was, back in the day, he'd spend so much time working on his engine that sometimes he'd run out of time and wouldn't have time to fix the brakes if the brakes weren't working. But that's probably why he won so many races, because if he was in first, he just wouldn't brake, and if he was in last, he'd use the car in front of him to brake. And that's why he tended to go around the cars and pass them all and win instead of ramming into them. Or if he did ram into them, they'd spin out and he'd pass them anyway. Charles was a great family man. He had 4 kids of his own before his first wife passed away, and then he remarried, having stepchildren that only knew Charles as their father. Having so many children allowed him to have so many grandchildren, and I don't even know how many he has at this point. It's over 20 and growing. So when we leave here, let's not leave here in tears. Let's not leave here in sorrow. But let's leave here remembering a man. A man that ended the Korean War. A man that was a hard worker his whole life. A man with a great racing career. A man who loved his family and was always there for them.